Hi there. You are either watching or listening to The Climb, and my name is John Sirakis, and this is brought to you by the Digital Mastermind. The Digital Mastermind is a group of agency owners, marketers, technologists that come together to solve our industry's problems as well as our individual businesses. And if you do not have your tickets yet for the summit coming up October 16th, 17th, and October 17th, 18th, and 19th, get your tickets now. You can get those at digitalmastermind.com. Or if you're interested in joining, shoot me an email, Jon at digitalmastermind.com. All right. So people get hung up on planning. Too many of us get hung up on the way that things feel. We put ourselves into this scenario where we're always trying to feel good. Yes, and that's something that we should strive for, right? We want to strive for that comfort, but not at the cost of having discomfort in everything. Because anytime you're continually running away from that in your business, you're going to get entirely too comfortable in the wrong things. And all great things come from discomfort. So the trick is making sure that something's not going to last mentally or physically. That's something that you can tell yourself and also realize, because all good things, they come and they go, as do bad things. So make sure you have that recovery time as needed. But the main thing you need to walk away from in this is look for that discomfort. Look for the places that you're entirely too comfortable, because that's what creates a complacency, and the complacency will be the demise of anything that great that you want to accomplish. All right. So today we have a fantastic episode. We got to speak with Sarah Fejfar. It rhymes with paper. Myself having a last name that's hard to pronounce, I need all those mnemonics because ironically I slaughter everybody's last name, but I'm pretty sure I got that one right. She was a fantastic guest on the show, and we talked about essentially creating events, right? Because that's what she does. She's a consultant that does that. But before we get into all that, Dave, why don't you come out here?
How's it going?
Going well. How about you?
Going great.
All right, blue. It's I'm blue today. What's interesting is my parents, at some point in my childhood, I told my parents like blue is my favorite color, right?
Mine as well.
But at least for me, favorite colors have changed. It's not one that just sticks with. But till this day, anytime they buy me a gift, it's like always blue. So I golf. They buy me blue golf balls. The hardest ball color to see when you hit it into the sky
sure.
is a blue golf ball. And I don't have the heart to tell them.
It just depends on how good of a golfer you are, because I would imagine it's a much easier to see in the grass. I don't know, white ball's pretty easy too, but I'm always in the rough, so I need something bright.
Yeah, but it's that flight path, because you're golfing with a buddy or a partner or whatnot, and they're gonna like, dude, I have no idea where that went. It's just like, okay, on to the next one. But so yeah, we talked about we talked about events, and we throw an event which we touched a little bit on the interview. But I think, and we actually going back to our interview with Jeff from 352 and how he drums up business, he throws an event as well. So I think it's something that a lot of agency owners and business owners should really figure out, like how in their space or their niche can they throw something that's going to be a magnetic approach that's going to just continually pay dividends.
Not only that, but it's the creating the value that makes it worthwhile to show up. I mean, it's a challenge, and you knocked it out of the park this year with this year's event of the speaker that you've been able to get, and you can talk about that later when we get closer to the event. But I mean, it's constantly. We've only been doing this this is our third year managing the DMG event, and I have to say, I think we've done a really good job. I'm going to pat ourselves on the back a little bit here, because I think we've done really good and we've gotten some really good feedback. But the challenge of thinking, and it's kind of the mantra that I hear, I'm reading on LinkedIn nonstop now, is just be better than you were yesterday. Our events just have to be better than the last year's event. And if we maintain that mentality, we'll keep driving interesting events. And I love that we have the freedom to pick a different location every year. It adds its own little spice and flavor and uniqueness to each year's event. So I'm really excited about St. Augustine this year. It's one of my favorite towns I've ever visited.
I went to an event. I went to it a year ago, and I just went to it now, and it was at the same location. And that's just it takes a lot of novelty out of it. Right?
It's hard to one up last year's event when it's the same venue every single time. The only way you can one up is just better speakers or better free giveaways, or how do you, but changing the venue every year runs the risk of running into a bad venue.
True, but I think that's on the site selection of the event host, because anytime and most of these events, they're educational, right? It's not like I'm going to a party. And when you remove that novelty, it begins to feel like school. You had to go to school
Right.
every day, right? Yeah, you're there to learn, but you also want some change and some stimulation. And it was just like, yeah, it was an okay hotel. And you go the second time, you're like, it's less of an okay hotel.
Well, I mean, I think you see that with some DMG members that have kind of dropped off and don't attend anymore. You fall into the two groups of, is this education or is this entertainment? And I like to think DMG is a nice blend of both, education and entertainment. But if you're too much on the education, then it feels like a chore. Now you're penciled in with a chore every year.
Yeah.
And I recently had an experience. I'm in the community redevelopment agency here in Jacksonville Beach, and I went to the Florida Redevelopment Conference. And hey, there was chock full of information, but it was purely designed purely to be an educational thing. And man, was I bored. I mean, I was going there to learn, but will I go next year? Don't want to.
Did you see anybody sleeping?
Probably a couple. I mean, the food was terrible too. Jeez.
That's the other thing, the food. I've had somebody say like, "Hey, I want to let you know that this is the worst gumbo I've ever tasted in my life." And I'm like, "Oh, that sucks." And then 2 minutes later, a person walks up like, "Hey, I'm from New Orleans. This is the best gumbo I've ever had in my life." So it's not taking those as you just have to get the full spectrum of it and not make changes based on what one person's saying.
Well, one of the things I fell in love with DMG was that we didn't rely on the hotel catering service to feed us dinner. We actually went to a high-end restaurant, and they know how to make food, and they know how to make food for a lot of people. Whereas this conference I went to, which was based in Fort Myers, it was just like a buffet. When you see buffet, you already know that you're not going to get the best food, and it was beyond terrible. It was beyond terrible.
I think that's the importance of that kind of. It's like the nuance. People don't realize they're being entertained, and that's a beautiful thing when you're creating connectivity, getting everybody together, and you have decent food, you have a decent atmosphere. It makes everything just a little bit easier. It adds that sparkle that they don't necessarily see.
It just goes to show how many elements it takes to pull off a great event. You have to have the content. You have to have the speakers. You have to have the venue. You have to have the food. You have to have the flow of the event. You can't just open up a convention hall and say, all right, everybody, have an event. You have to plan it out. When do they speak? How do they speak? I love how we push the sponsors to host a happy hour, and give them a chance to speak while everyone's having a cocktail. I mean, that's a much better environment than, having to go through a sponsor presentation in the middle of a convention center. It's so lifeless. Whereas DMG just has so much life pumped into it, which is why everyone loves it, which is why everyone leaves from that conference so pumped up.
Yeah, we get some gnarly survey responses, so that's good. And this year's event, I think, is going to be the best yet. So we got a lot of really good things in line. Solid restaurants, going to have amazing food, got some great speakers. What's cool about this year's speakers, and I think we'll announce them as soon as I get some bios approved and whatnot, is they're not the traditional speakers, but they're potentially some of the best that are in this space, because there's a lot of people doing something similar to what we're doing. But I think we've got to take it upon ourselves to just, like you were saying, do better than you did the last time. Somebody once told me this is something that I love, where her father said when she was a kid, don't give it 200%, 1,000% or anything like that. That's all bullshit. All you have to do is do 10% better than everybody else that's around you. If you just do that, then you're going to do your best, typically, right? Granted, you have to find the best people to do that in. But I like that. So if we're just doing 10% better than last year, all right, cool, rock and roll. We're doing a great job.
Just improving every year.
Yep.
Just making sure that you looked at your past performance and you aim to beat that every year. You're not just going, well, all we got to do is the same thing.
Yep.
No, if you do the same thing, you're going to lose. You're losing ground.
Yeah, and there's some people that just do that rote thing, and it's the same and the same and the same, and then they just wonder why they get the attrition. But no, I'm excited. And speaking of excitement, here is our interview with Sarah Fejfar. Please enjoy. Go ahead and like, comment, share. Let us know what you think. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Jon. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you here. So I'd like to start with your climb. How did you get here?
How did I get here? Oh, goodness. That's a big question to start with, Jon. I got here. I never anticipated I would ever be running my own business ever in a million years. But when I was in the corporate world for, gosh, was it almost 16 years? I always had this like sense that I was made for more but could never see myself entering the corner office. Like I'm really big on visualizing what I want and being able to like wanting to see myself in that place before I go get it. And I could never picture myself moving out of the cubicles and into one of those offices. Like I just didn't want that. And it wasn't until I met personal development, probably about 36 years old, just way too late, that I realized that you can like choose your own destiny and pick a different path. And I think that's when I learned that entrepreneurship even existed, that I was in the event space for many, many, many years. And that was when I realized that events, there were events where people willingly chose to go. They paid with their own money. They were thrilled to be there. And up until that time, my worldview was corporate events where people, we were paying their way to go. They had to go and they were not thrilled to be there. And so to find myself in a personal development conference where I was shoulder to shoulder with people who were living these totally different lifestyles than me. Like they did not have a cubicle and work with 7,000 of their closest friends in the same building. They lived wherever they wanted. Like this was above the fold front page news for me, Jon. I did not realize that was a thing. And it took a while for me to connect the dots, but I finally realized I'm called to serve the entrepreneur. Like I can take what I absolutely am madly passionate about, which is events, and serve the small business owner and help them scale with those events. And the day I connected those dots was a happy one.
What was like the first like step into like self-help where you began to realize this and make the connection?
Yeah, well, when we were talking offline, you mentioned that you're reading High Performance Habits right now by Brendon Burchard, and actually he was my gateway drug into personal development. So my corporation had this culture challenge. They were trying to take like, this global corporation and inject some essentially personal development training in. I didn't realize that was what it was. And they gave everyone some training at a live in-person event. And then afterwards, they gave everyone access to an app. And the app had you do some challenges every single day. And at the end of the month, you'd figure out who had the most points and they get prizes. And one of the activities that was in the app was watching these short form personal development videos. And one of them happened to be one of those black and white 8-minute personal development videos on YouTube that Brendon Burchard is so famous for. And I watched one and I just got hooked. And it was about the same length as my commute to and from work. So I would listen to one on the way to work and one on the way back. And that went on for months. And then I fell into one of his marketing funnels. I didn't realize that funnels existed at that point and that I had fallen into one, bought one of his courses on personal development. It came with free tickets to one of his in-person events, ended up in the audience, and it was probably a year later, and that changed my life forever.
Wow. So it took a year from...
Yeah. I probably started listening to the stuff And I did that for maybe 3-4 months. And then I bought like a $1,000 personal development course from him. And then I sat on the offer of free tickets for a year. I just didn't pay attention. And then I finally just felt nudged, like, I think I need to go to this thing and be in this room. And that was the first time I'd ever, like I said, gone to an event paid with my own money, was interested in going, like thrilled to be in the room. And then also it was the first time I ever seen my first offer and table rush at the back of a room. And my mind was blown. Yeah.
Wow. And you already worked in events prior to
Oh,
this?
oh yeah. 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 I've been in events for almost a little over 20 years now. And I probably spent more than a dozen years in corporate events by that time. And just, it's a different beast.
So you didn't realize like what was happening when it was happening.
Not at all. I'd never been exposed to that before. I'd never been exposed to personal development. I had never been exposed to facilitation that was that good. I think I got very lucky in having entered not only the digital marketing space from the personal development digital marketing space, like that online expert space. Following Brendan, I think I got very lucky because he is like at the top of his game when it comes to direct response marketing and filling events, and then he's at the top of his game in terms of facilitating a live experience for guests. Just really masterful at public speaking, movement on stage, and then facilitating the experience for guests so that they feel seen and heard and celebrated. And me as an introvert entering a room with a couple thousand people is like anxiety inducing. And to be able to go into a room and feel so welcomed and so comfortable and open to sharing, like that's a gift that he has. And it was directly a result of his ability to lead a room. And so I think I got lucky in having that be my first experience.
I also think it's interesting that you were indirectly filtered out by your company through self-help. Like,
yeah, I suppose.
yeah, they're like,
Yep.
we're now losing all of our staff because they're turning into entrepreneurs. I think we need to rethink this, guys.
I don't think it was everybody. No.
So you go from this Brendan Bouchard, yeah, and he's a fantastic author. I've just started my journey. I didn't know this guy existed, so I mean that may come back to haunt me saying that. But so you go from this. It sounds like it's a year later. Did an epiphany happen? And like, where did you go from there before you started your events coaching and business
consulting business? Yeah. So that was 2017 in the fall, and that was his first of a series of 4-day events. And so that was September of 2017. I went to his 4-day personal development event, and then I learned at that event that there's an event that teaches people entrepreneurship that he was putting on a month later. It was also a 4-day event. So I went to that one, and then at that one I learned that there was another one after that, a 4-day event a month later on public speaking. So I went to that one. So I did the trifecta, all of his major events in the span of 3 months. And then I took my husband a few months later to the next one, and the personal development one. And by that time, we were strongly considering moving across the country. We had been firmly planted in the Midwest our entire lives. And just that small dose of personal development and like peek into the world that other people live differently and choose where they want to live and choose how they want to work, like that whole lifestyle freedom, time freedom business. I was just so like surprising to us. We picked up and moved 6 months so that was September of 2017 was my first event. By that following September, I had moved across the country, left my job, and started my own business.
Wow.
It was huge. It was huge. That's how like amazing and pivotal that experience of being in a room surrounded by other people who are striving for more. Uh, that's how powerful it was for me.
I think it's important to acknowledge you for doing that, but I also think it's important to acknowledge your husband. Like, I mean, you went to some courses and he's like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, props to Cliff for being extremely supportive and flexible and patient, but he also was super excited too with the opportunity and we moved out here to Portland, Oregon from the Twin Cities in Minnesota, where we'd been for 20 years. Just for mountains, ocean, crunchy foodies, and I couldn't be more grateful that we made that humongous leap. I mean, at that point, it was like we'd never ever done anything like that, and nor did we ever think it was possible. I mean, you heard these whispers occasionally of some people moving out of where you grow up, but you never think it could be for you. And so doing it felt like the biggest, craziest, wildest thing that we'd ever done. And then now that we've done it, it's like, oh gosh, you can do that again and again and again. And it gets not that big of a deal. And why do some people stay so stuck for so long? And it's fear.
I think it's fear, but I also think it's what I've noticed, and I know some people, I'm not going to call them out on the show, is their tolerance for pain is so high. Like they can just take it. They can be completely miserable, and like they may live like that for the rest of their lives, even knowing everything that they know, but they can just tolerate more pain than some of us. And I don't know. And I think that's probably going to be maybe something in the future that people talk about, is just that pain tolerance.
I never thought about it that way. Tolerance for pain, or it is painful. I mean, I know I stayed way longer than I ever wanted to because I was risk averse, and that's why I stayed stuck in corporate America. And I mean, it's never as safe as we think, but
yeah, amen to that. So now you're a consultant that helps others plan, and you pitch it better than me because that's your job.
Yeah. So so I started my own business to help the online business owners scale their businesses with events, and it's like I said, my favorite thing to do is events. But I'm approaching it from this standpoint of not opening. I never chose to open a boutique event planning agency for a reason. Like that's just burnout city to go in that direction, even though it would be so fun to plan everybody's events for them. I really am approaching it from the educational standpoint, because I really want to kind of teach people to fish and allow them to thrive in that way. So yeah, I do coaching, some consulting, and my flagship course, Live Event Academy, is where I do the most help for the most people. Just yeah. So that's me.
With those, you've kind of stated your experience, your climb, how you got there. When it comes to most of our audiences is agency owners, and some family members. So as far as that is concerned, like what have you seen as successful for agency owners when it comes to events?
Yeah. So when it comes to agency owners, I think that the sweet spot for events for them is in that building loyalty. So I say that events are ideal for businesses because they make it easier to make high ticket offers. They are excellent at building loyalty, and I think that the building loyalty part is kind of the lane that makes the most sense for doing events for agency owners. I think that I don't, how you've heard of Salesforce, right?
No, never. Of course.
Like, Your sense of humor, John. So Salesforce puts on their annual conference, user conference called Dreamforce, right? They're not directly making offers there, but they're following up afterwards, right? It's definitely um, a play on building loyalty. And then the back end sales happen again like later afterwards. And I see that as a way for agency owners to add value to their communities by doing events that are more that user conference type where they're adding value, they're helping their clients stay up to date on trends. They are creating mastermind like experiences where their clients are able to network with each other and add value to each other. I think that's the sweet spot for agencies, owners, and events. It definitely in that kind of that loyalty space.
So in some respects, they could break even, but it's a longer term play. They don't have to break even, but I mean, at a minimum, they could just figure out how to do this for whatever their niche is, whether it's legal or if
Mhm.
they work with roofing companies, so on and so forth. And it's a magnetic approach, right? You're going to offer a lot of value, you're going to get a lot of people there, and then it gives you the ability to continue to market to them.
Yeah, no, it is just that continued relationship building, and it's just a higher touch, more intimate experience, I think. Yeah.
So I definitely have some questions on like some how-to stuff. But before that, just something maybe anecdotal. Have you ever been to an event, and I have, where they're like these really big events, and they get this big celebrity that's on stage that has nothing to do with this industry, and then they'll say something like, "Yeah, yeah, and that's what you guys can do in your mortgage industry." And they always look at like whoever the person throwing the event is, like they're throwing them a bone. Have you ever witnessed that, or is that just something I notice with my weird sense of humor?
Yes, I am aware.
Yeah, like they get the
And
draw, like they get these huge people there, and then it's like there's a complete disconnect usually with that, but that person pulled everybody in.
yeah, and so that's just some finesse that you have to have as the person hosting the event in like say controlling the room, but you need to be able to have some say over what this guest speaker is going to say. And I think sometimes there's this desire to get the big name just because they are the big name. But then they quickly realize that that big name wants nothing to do with getting to know your business and your audience, so that they can in tiny ways tailor their talk to
Mhm.
who's in the room. And if you're not going to have that ability to have that dialogue beforehand so that the talk resonates and makes sense and adds value, you don't look as good as the event host afterwards, you
Yeah,
know?
I do. Yeah, and I've seen it. I'm like, ooh, that's a little cringy. But I've thrown events, so I have a little bit of experience, and I think that's where you and I, off camera, start talking about this. So to others, I know some of our listeners want to throw their own events. Let's say it's an agency, they've been in business 5, 10 years. Like, what is their process? Like, what would you recommend that they do to launch their first one?
Yeah. Well, so the very first thing I would do, my process inside of the academy is picture, plan, and produce. And in that picture stage, I really want people spending some time deciding why. Why are they doing this for their business and why are they doing this for their community? And don't do any of the sexy fun stuff until you know the answers to those questions. Yes, it's fun to go pick out swag. Yes, it's fun to go find that guest speaker that is going to make you feel good about yourself, that you got this big name at your event. Like, but don't just start with why, because until you know that, you won't have like that lighthouse that will guide you to make all of the other decisions along the way. And so that's where I have people start. And
Got it.
so it might be something like we're using this as a lead magnet. We're using this as a way to build our authority in the marketplace and reach more dream clients. Or maybe we're using this as a build loyalty play, and this is something that is just for current and past clients, and this is our way of giving back and staying in touch. Or, and I don't think it's this one like we talked about before, but maybe it's making easier high ticket sales. I don't see agencies making an offer at the event, but I do see it as a way of, handing leads off to your like phone sales team afterwards to follow up with the folks. But figure out what it is and figure out what feels right to you. We talked about this concept of resentment when it comes to how much money you're making or not making or losing on the event. Get real clear on that too, and that process at the beginning, your why.
So yeah, it sounds like create a North Star, with your why, and then like what should somebody budget if they want to create their first event? I mean, that probably varies wildly, but what are some safe numbers that somebody could begin earmarking and allocating for?
I don't ever want to have someone start with, this is how much money. I would prefer somebody start with designing the experience that they want their guests to have and putting a price tag on what that is.
Uh-huh.
And then deciding if that feels good to them, that they're either footing that entire bill themselves or they're finding some way to pay for it, whether it's in ticket sales, or maybe it's sponsorship opportunities for adjacent companies that would make sense to their guests. But I would prefer someone price out the experience that they want to create and then go and decide, hey, do I feel comfortable footing that bill, or can I go and pay for it in some way? Versus I think people get out of alignment and don't have like the joy in the experience that they wish they would have when they start with a number and then try and like fit everything into that number.
Got it. Yeah. So if somebody starts dreaming big, like I want Oprah there, and I want Gary Vee, and yeah,
Well, okay. I want to address that for a moment, because I think too often that the event host, so in this case, the agency owner, their team, discredits the expertise that they already have in the room. I really think people don't believe in themselves enough that they already know enough to hold space on a stage for a full day, for 3 days, without having to hire or barter or like ask someone to come in as a favor and hide behind a panel of speakers. I'm super like on a soapbox on this topic, because I just think people don't give themselves enough credit and have this fear that they couldn't possibly come up with enough content to fill an entire event on their own.
So other than that and not having a why, what are some things that you also see, maybe first timers or people that have been doing this a long time? Like, what are they doing wrong or incorrectly?
So I think one of the biggest mistakes is people have there's one of two things. People have a fear of filling it, and people have a fear of it's mindset based, like, who am I to put something on like this? And when we talk about the filling it, I think that is one of the biggest mistakes, is people do not have a plan on how to fill an event, and they make the mistake of thinking that mentioning it a couple times is going to fill the event. And you and I both know, Jon, that's not the case, that you do have to, like, you have to build a plan and work the plan consistently in order to get butts in seats. And so people come at the planning of an event without a plan for how they're going to fill it. And then they are so freaked out that no one's going to be in the room that they don't have any energy or mind space to think about all of the other minutia details that need to like get planned in order for the event to go off well. And so they're just using too much of their energy on the filling it or the freaking out that it's not filling because they didn't have a plan in place. And so then the other stuff that should be paid attention to isn't.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And I like the experience. Yeah. Cause the event that we throw, it's all about the experience and the connectivity between people. And there's a lot of energy that goes into that at the event, but I think we have a decent framework. But you're right. I mean, even every year there's always that concern, like, oh man, like are we going to sell it? And I've spoke to some people that have had events where there's thousands of people in there, and yeah, they said that fear shouldn't ever go away, because that's also a driver that's going to make you fill those seats.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that to some extent it doesn't ever go away, but you do need to have a plan and work
Oh yeah,
within
for sure.
consistently. That's so important. So I'd say that's probably the biggest mistake that I see people making. The other one probably.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The other one is probably on the money side of people, like we talked about before, just like deciding on a number, which is just so crazy before they even figure out what it might possibly cost to do what they would actually want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, I've spoke with some people that they've had book signings where they had a plan of like hundreds of people coming, and like nobody came, like not even one person. And I hear those stories. I'm like, oh, what's the biggest failure you've seen or even heard of? You don't have to mention names, but if you would, that'd be awesome.
Gosh, this is just silly. I will mention it just because it's what came to mind. But I had an event once where we hired we were in the Miami area, and we had hired some Latin dancers to come to the event to open it. And the failure was in addressing what they would be wearing, and if they were male female couples or all females. And I'll stop there, but we're talking about like an 8 a.m. start to a very corporate event. And we had a great band, and we just thought it would be fun to have dancers at the same time. It did not turn out as we had envisioned. From then on, I've always asked performers what they will be wearing. Specified.
How else would you have known that? Like, I mean, it's something only learned like through experience, right? Yeah. And then you have them sign like, yeah, there will be no dry humping on the dance floor either. All right.
Exactly.
We want classy clothes dancing.
This is the type of dancing I'm expecting. Here's a video. This is the type of clothing we're expecting. Again, here's some imagery for you to look at. Yeah, no, everyone was blushing. The devil is in the details. I had a client mention that a couple weeks ago, and they said that was one of the most like anxiety-inducing pieces of taking on events in their business is just realizing that there are so many details, and if you're not paying attention, like you get one wrong, that maybe it's okay, but like they start stacking, and then you kind of have this failure on your hands, and it doesn't feel good when you're live with people.
No, I actually have a story to that. So we do a lot of food, right? So food's very important to me. Like I love dining, and I've almost opened a restaurant. Not that qualifies me for anything, but almost being a dumb business person. But I get a lot of compliments and complaints on food. So we had a gumbo there. Somebody comes up to me and is like, "Hey, I got to let you know, that's probably the worst gumbo I've ever had." I was like, "Really?" And I didn't get to try it, So I was like, "All right, yeah, sorry, I'll give it a shot. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you." not even 30 seconds later, somebody goes, hey, John. I'm like, yeah, what's that? Like, dude, I'm from Louisiana. That is the best gumbo I've ever had outside of Louisiana. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, I love that they canceled each other out, but there's like all of these little things. And I always appreciate the feedback, especially being a marketer. But some of those, like, you have to just, you can't move in every single direction. You just have to understand like what's really important. At the end of the day, the gumbo is not really important. But I mean, the level of the speakers, the seating arrangements, can everybody hear? Is it too cold? I've been to some events where I'm like, dude, did you work in like a butcher's refrigerator? It is ridiculously cold. Like I got a parka on and I'm freezing. But I like how you said at the beginning of that Brendan Bouchard thing, when literally looking at it from that experience and making sure that everybody is comfortable. I think that is a great approach and a great position to people to start from, because if there are those small failures, at the end of the day, I think that'll be somebody's takeaway, that you really put a lot of thought and care and concern into the way that they would feel.
Yeah. What is it? Is it the Maya Angelou quote? They'll never remember what you did or said, but they'll always remember the way you felt.
You made them feel.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't know she said that. That's awesome.
is it who I don't know who said it, but someone did.
I
Someone
thought it
really
was my mom,
important.
but my Angela makes sense.
Yeah, safety, it's a big thing. And then also, like I've mentioned before, making sure people feel seen and heard and celebrated. That's just, everyone wants that, whether they say it or not. Every human being on the planet wants that. But going back to your comments about food, it's a hot button issue. And I think it's a great example of you can't, like you said, listen, like go ahead and survey people and take all that feedback in, but you can't make adjustments based on one person's preferences. You really have to wait until you see this landslide of feedback in one direction before you should consider making a course correction. But yeah, I don't think in my career I've ever seen something more polarizing and comment inducing than food.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for people. And as a foodie myself, it's big deal for me to like have good food at events, but also be thinking about what's going to help them stay focused and attentive. I think that's important too. But you also mentioned making sure people can see and hear, and that's a big mistake that people make, is underestimating the value of good lighting and good microphones. Be surprised how fast people check out if they can't quite hear well, or if they're not able to see something, whether it's on the screen or whatever the case may be, is something, like in your handouts, people can't see and hear. They're just like, I'm done. Like, this is way too much energy for me to stay engaged. Like I'm out.
So if somebody wants to start planning their event today, what are Sarah's quick boom, 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 start doing this today? Go.
Well, most of it is just not taking action, right? So, sorry about that. Most of people they're not starting. And so I would say start before you're ready, get a date on the calendar, and then worry about everything else. Don't be selecting, don't have a fear of all the things that I mentioned that might go wrong. Just get started and do your first and feel out. And then you will intuitively know like what needs to happen before the next one happens. Would you say that when you did your first, it was more just like, I need to rip the Band-Aid off and go, and then I'll figure the rest out after this first one?
Yeah, I mean, most of my life is like that. Just like dive right in, and we'll just kind of figure it out as we go along. Yeah.
Start before you're ready. Yeah, and then I do think that there is some value in hiring experts. So whether that's hiring a coach to advise you along the way, it's hiring an event planner. I always say, like, the leader should know at a high level, like, what the process is of putting on an event, because I do not think that you can properly delegate or manage the tasks if you don't yourself know what the heck the process is. So I do advise that people at least learn. And then if you need to go and hire an event planner or you need to go assign it to people on your team, great. But I think you are setting your team up for failure if you don't, as the leader, know what's going on.
Agreed. Yeah. And our framework was put in place by another gentleman that he was
Mhm,
super, super helpful. So I had gone to the event before and I got to witness it. But I think when you're actually responsible for all of it and you're not just some lurker that's sitting in the back of the room just listening to everybody, it's
mhm,
completely different. So that was something you just kind of muster up and just say like, okay, well, I mean, we're just going to do this and make it happen. So I think it is just that action, just taking massive action to make sure that everything falls into line. But having a plan and a framework, I think is important. I've never hired out. Actually, no, I take that back. We've hired people that have helped us with contracts, which I agree with that. They take a commission based on whatever they buy for you. So that's something that's been super helpful.
mm, interesting. I've
Yeah.
never or heard of that model where someone would take commission off the contracts. But yeah, no, it doesn't hurt to know that the contracts are taken care of. Like that's definitely important. And you mentioned something about just systems and process, and I think that is a fail point too. Is think that every business owner, when they're putting on the event, should go into it thinking that this is someday something that they're going to want to either scale or repeat, scale and repeat. And when you go in with that mindset, you're not going to do things that aren't repeatable and scalable. And you're going to be documenting preferences and best practices along the way. If you're doing something more than once, you should be thinking about automating it, right? Or outsourcing it. And an event is no different. And I think when people go into it without that mindset of repeatability and scalability, this just like kind of like willy-nilly, we don't need to have a process or a system for this. I think it becomes people then resent the process of putting on an event because it does take a lot of energy, and then it also can cost them more than it should. And so just a big fan of going in thinking that this is going to be repeated and scaled, so that it just puts a different mindset around the decisions you make and the team that you put in place to support the activity.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I mean, in anything that's successful, there's usually strong systems and processes behind it. So, all right, I know we've covered a lot, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you believe the world should know?
Well, I think we all just lived through the biggest worldwide case study ever of why it's so important to have opportunities for connection and for community and learning new content. And I personally believe that events is the best container for that. And I just think when it was taken from us a couple years ago, we all felt that collective sense of loss. And I don't want people to have a fear right now still of gathering and not going and taking the actions needed to go gather the people that only you can gather. Like I really think agency owners should put on this like very strong leadership hat when thinking about why they might put on an event, because they're the only people that can gather that unique community that is their clients, the people that are attracted to their business model, and not to underestimate how much value the people within their community would get out of being brought together by the agency owner. I think people discount that value and that they could bring to their communities by taking the next step and gathering them.
Taking the action, making it happen.
Yeah.
All right. So Is there anything that you would like to plug or promote, and how can the world get a hold of you?
Yeah, so head on over to the Green Room Central podcast. That's my podcast all about events for business owners. And then I'm always available on LinkedIn and Instagram at Sarah Fejfar.
How do you spell that?
Oh, it's paper like, well, I say it's Fejfar is like paper, but with F's. But the spelling is a little more challenging. Fejfar.
Right on. Sarah, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, John. Appreciate being here.
Hope you enjoyed our episode. Please subscribe and review wherever you can. And if you would like to join the Digital Mastermind, go ahead and shoot me an email at jon@digitalmastermind.com or visit us at digitalmastermind.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye now.